let technology do what technology does best so that people can do what people do best.
In your book, Blue Goldfish, you talk about how technology and analytics will help drive profits, Profits, and profits, Prophets. What the heck do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, it's a funny play on words, and the reason we came to that, both Stan Phelps and myself, my co-author, is that we believe that customer experience will do two things for your business. Number one is it will help you build deeper relationships with the customers you have, increase their loyalty, and that's where the profits come from, with the I. And then those people will become, as Jay Baer likes to call them, volunteer brand advocates, or volunteer communicators who are going to promote your brand because of their great experience. And that's where the profits come from, the PHETs, those who are going to get out there and be those volunteer marketers that share your message. And so the mantra is take care of the customers you have, and they will bring you the customers you want.
So you're basically elevating this idea of brand advocacy to saying that these are your brand prophets. They're going to go out there and they're going to preach about your particular brand.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's exactly what we're going for. And I think the power of combining that with technology, data, analytics is that we today know so much more about our customers. We can have a complete picture of our customer's journey. Every transaction they've done with us, every click they've made with us. And there are certainly privacy concerns that we have to be concerned with, but the power of that data to truly understand what our customers want, not in terms of a market segment, but in terms of individuals. And we also have the power in our digital communications tools, our digital marketing tools, to customize that customer's experience at every single touch point.
When it comes to the customer experience, how will that customer experience change in the next 5 years? What will customers start to expect? And what will marketers have to do to either meet or exceed those expectations?
So I think the important thing for marketers to realize about customer expectations is that they're not set by the last interaction they had with your brand. They're not set by your competitors. They are set by every single brand with whom they come in contact. And so there's something we talk about in Blue Goldfish, which is the Amazon effect. And that is that as companies like Amazon push the expectation of customers forward, the fact that if I needed something, I could probably have it here within an hour, depending on what it was. Those expectations are what our customers are judging us against, not the expectations that might seem normal or typical for our industry. And so I think the biggest change that we're going to deal with is this increasing curve of customer expectations. And as one brand pushes forward, it's going to cause all brands to need to level up. And I find that there are industries where they might be a little more behind the times, and that is something that they've been able to enjoy, and that slower pace. And I think those industries are next up for being disrupted by the customer-focused companies who are they're out to eat your lunch, and they're constantly looking for industries where they can disrupt.
And what can marketers do now to prepare for this increased expectation from customers?
So I have a mantra whenever I speak, and that is, let technology do what technology does best so that people can do what people do best. And I believe that as a part of that increasing curve of customer expectations, we're also going to see a time where there's going to be so much technology that we're going to interact with as customers that the human touch will be at a premium. And so I believe the really smart brands are those that will say, what can we automate? What makes sense to automate? And how can we then free up our human time for more face-to-face interactions with our customers, such that even though we all know we're on this under constant pressure to do more with less, how can we use technology to empower people to be what I would call deliver superhuman customer service, as opposed to replacing them?
This is amazing, because it really is a matter of moving more digital so you can be more human.
Exactly. And so I often like to say that technology has caused this, the dehumanization of the customer experience we have with brands, but it's also the only thing that can save us, because we have so many goals to perform at the highest levels and to serve so many customers in ways that we never anticipated, say 60 years ago, being able to have a company serve as many customers as it actually does today. And so what I think is really interesting here is, as companies embrace this idea that we need to have a more human experience, I hope we put on the lens of our customer and say, when do they need a person, and when will an automated solution do? Or how can we make our people better and give them more information, allow them to give more personal service by virtue of the information they have available to us, the automation that all exists behind the scenes. So your question earlier was, what can marketers do? They have to understand the power of data. Everything that I talk about is based upon understanding the customer and what they want at an individual level. So unless you're today thinking about ways, how do I track as much as I can, with both within reason and certainly considering the various privacy implications of it, by virtue of taking that step now, you're going to be preparing yourself for a time where you absolutely need that data to serve your customers.
What would you say to a chief marketing officer or a director of marketing as far as why the importance of customer experience perhaps is more important than what traditional marketing has looked at with advertising and promotion and looking at product design? Why is customer experience the next big thing in marketing? Even though we've had it for years, right?
Yes.
We've had it. But it seems like it's becoming more important. What would you say to them to get them to understand this? And I'm sure you do this all the time when you're talking to CMOs. What do you say to them to get them to move their thinking and change their way of thinking?
Well, the good news is most CMOs today, they haven't gotten there by virtue of not thinking about customer experience. So it's actually it's usually an easy conversation. But to the unenlightened, what I share with them is the notion that by taking care of the customer you have, they are going to become more valuable to you. This is both in terms of their own personal loyalty, and as we talked about earlier, the sharing that they're going to do with others, the word of mouth. And so if the sort of carrot doesn't get the CMO excited, I bring out the stick. Because how many brands in the last 2 years have been absolutely eviscerated by a negative customer experience? Negative customer experience, amplified by social media, amplified by traditional media, and then we have a full-on PR crisis for a brand. And so, as a CMO, you get to choose. You have a choice between, do we focus on taking care of the customer, or do we focus on other factors that we feel like we need to focus on? My belief is that if you start with the customer and with the employees, all of the other things will work themselves out along the way. But if you start from the notion of, how do I drive profits, or how do I drive more ROI, your mindset is going to be such that you're willing to compromise the employee experience. You're willing to compromise the customer experience, and you're not going to arrive at that ultimate destination where you can have what I like to call the win-win-win. And those are experiences that are better for the customer, better for the employees, and better for the bottom line. I believe it's possible to have all three, but you have to go about it with that mindset. Otherwise, you're going to fall very easily into some common traps.
Now, you went from a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in information science, and then now you go all over the world talking about customer experience. So how did you make this transition from being so technical to being so human? Not that you weren't human before, but...
So that's a really interesting question. And my career journey, when I finished my bachelor's in information science, I started with an ad agency. I was on their user experience team for their digital products. And that evolved to the point where I was working on strategy for the agency. And at that point, I felt like I certainly learned marketing on the job there, but I started to feel like I'd gotten away from my roots, because the websites I was building, the apps I was building, they were designed to influence a customer, but they weren't necessarily designed to serve the customer. I was really frustrated that oftentimes we would uncover a root issue that was not something we could advertise or communicate our way out of, but we weren't empowered to affect change there. So I went over to the corporate side. I was a UX designer and a product manager for a software company for a few years, and I ran into the same frustration that the orientation of the company, despite saying it had a focus on the customer, really had more of a focus on internal operations, efficiency, sales, and honestly, if it could be tracked with a dollar value. They weren't willing to undertake the efforts to have a truly customer-centric organization. So frustrated with that was when I wrote my second book, Blue Goldfish, and said it's time to see if I can start affecting change and get out there in front of CMOs, in front of the influencers and companies, and help them see that there is a different way to go about business.
Do you feel like you are getting a lot of traction now with people understanding that customer experience, customer engagement really does, it is really more important than that focus on only the bottom line or that solely bottom line? Do you feel like there's a change that's occurring out there in the marketplace?
I do think there is. And it's honestly because companies are realizing that customer experience, to our earlier conversation, can be a battlefield you win on or can be a battlefield you lose on. But there's not a middle ground there. You never hear from a customer who says, this met my expectations. That's not a conversation we have. We only talk about things whenever it is really great or really bad. And unfortunately, our standards for what is really bad is constantly going up. Our standards for what is really great is constantly going up. But you're not going to hear from someone who says, they met my expectations. You're never going to have that conversation. It's not an interesting story. And so I find that change is starting to happen more and more. And it's companies who are even primarily digital who are understanding the increased importance of that experience. I think a lot of brick and mortars have understood that for some time now, but I'm seeing a lot more digital companies realize that they need to focus on the customer experience as well.
I had a question that came to me a couple months back, and someone had asked, what happens with these situations where the customer really is just not done the right thing? It's their fault. They are being disruptive, whatever it is. And they said, why is it that the customer is always right, and why can't the company be right instead? Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a very interesting type of a question. So my question is the customer always right?
The customer is always right in the sense that the way the customer is feeling and the expression that they're expressing is real. The reality of the customer story is real in their mind. So as a brand, as a company, the facts may be on your side, but as we all know, it's all about what we believe about those facts. And in my perspective, you do have to, as a company, be careful. You can't liberally, have a wide policy that would allow anything. But you know what? There are companies who succeed like that. I mean, Nordstrom, many years ago, accepted a return of snow tires. They don't even sell snow tires.
Exactly.
Now, that's I think that's an extreme example. But the point is the narrative in the customer's mind is true. And you have an opportunity at those moments where the customer believes they're right to not only solve their issue and sort of, to use a military term, neutralize the negative PR threat, but you have an opportunity in those moments to create advocates for them to say, you know what, I knew I was being a little unreasonable. I knew I made a mistake, but the company went the extra mile for me. So the customer may be mistaken, but in their minds, they are right. That's what I have to say about that.
All right. I think this has been great. It's been very gracious of you to
happy to
spend your
happy
time
to be
with
here.
us. We really appreciate it. And we know you have a lot more things to do, and you have some speaking to do at the conference later on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.